Morning, everyone. On behalf of Delhi Comparatives, I extend a warm welcome to all of you. And before we move ahead with today's session, I would invite Charulika to introduce Delhi Comparatives as a group. Please, Charulika.
Thank you, Pavitra. A very warm welcome to everyone. A very good morning. I'm here to actually introduce our academic group, Delhi Comparatives, which is a group of students and faculty members from the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, University of Delhi, who are driven by a common interest, that is an active engagement with the discipline of comparative literature. We started in 2010, and through this decade-long journey, Delhi Comparatives has become a large group of scholars sharing its vision with respect to literature and cultural studies. The group attempts to approach Indian literary culture through a prism of pluralistic epistemology, with the thrust areas like history and the concepts of comparative Indian literature, theory, multiple clusters of interrelatedness, literary historiography, gender issues, transmediality, migration, and border studies, and electric literature, and so on. So, methodologically speaking, the perspectives on marginocentrism and social epistemology, on material aspects of literary studies and dense archives are the characteristic features of Delhi Comparatists. We emphatically endeavor to create a sustainable and socially relevant hub that engages with and enhances the tools, methodologies, theory, and approaches analogous to these pluralistic and dynamically interactive areas of study. So this is in a nutshell, Delhi Comparatives for you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charulika. I would now like to take some time to introduce our subgroup, Comparative Folklore Studies. The primary intention of this group is to expand the horizon of communication between folklorists in the Indian subcontinent. And the intention is to develop critical tools and methodologies which are unique to studying vernacular folklore. Our focus and emphasis is to use a comparative framework along with tools like intermediality. And also, we feel that there is a need for dense archive given the context of the Indian subcontinent, which is characterized on one hand by multiplicity and heterogeneity, but on the other hand by constant overlaps, sharing, and dialogues. And I feel this is the first lecture under the subgroup, and I feel there would not have been a better person than Professor Nandini Sahu to initiate a conversation on folklore studies in the context of Indian academia. So, and I have the privilege today to introduce you to all of you to her, which I feel that most of us who are here, we don't need her introduction. So I'm going to be very brief. I'm going to be very brief. Professor Nandini Sahu is a professor of English at IGNOU, New Delhi. She is an established Indian English poet, creative writer, theorist, and folklorist who has been author and editor of 15 books. Her research work has been widely published in India and outside. She is the recipient of Literary Award from Honorable Vice President of India for her contribution to English studies. Her areas of research and interest cover new literatures, critical theory, folklore and culture studies, children's literature, and American literature. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us. And before I hand over the virtual platform to ma'am, I would request everyone to please keep themselves on mute while the talk is going on. And you can put your comments and questions in the chat box, and we will take them up after the talk. Thank you so much. And without wasting any more time, over to you, ma'am.
May I?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Pavitra, for this introduction, which actually humbles me. Well, respected Professor Amitava and respected and very dear Professor Satyanath and Dr. Pavitra, Dr. Ravindranath Sharma, my research scholar Diksha, and many of you, my entire team, most of the members of my team attending this lecture. and the faculty and the researchers, folklorists and students of the department. A very good morning to all of you. I would thank the Delhi Comparatives for having given me this opportunity to interact with you. In fact, I am not here to deliver any lecture. This is the first lecture in the series. So I would try to be as brief as possible when it comes to the theoretical discussions. I would only introduce the subject, why folklore? When Dr. Pavitra said, ma'am, we would like to invite you to have a discussion with us on any of the subjects of your interest related to comparative literature, the sustainable studies that we have introduced, like Dr. Charulika rightly pointed out. And then Dr. Pavitra also said that tools and methodologies they are planning to develop and design for the research in pedagogy, in comparative literature, and in folklore studies and culture studies. So many things, multiple ideas they have in their mind. Very, very bright. I can see today's youth really working hard, and the best evidence to that. I will come to that. Why I admire this group, I will definitely come to that. So, with all that in my mind, when Dr. Pavitra asked me, ma'am, you can talk about anything of your interest, one thing came to my mind, why folklore? Because this is one question which I have faced multiple times since 2009. I joined IGNOU, Indira Gandhi National Open University, the world's largest university in terms of our academic programs and students' intake. I joined in 2006, and then after that, before we design and develop any programs, any academic programs for our university, we have to do a need assessment survey. What kind of courses are actually needed, actually required? And then when I checked the syllabi of our universities, especially my university, I saw that we had all kinds of courses starting with British literature, American literature to Canadian studies to linguistics to Indian writing in English. We had all kinds of courses, but we didn't have Indian folk literature. We didn't have folk literature per se, which is so very important. That it's a way of life. We grow up with that way of life. And the indigenous studies, the oral literatures, have exchanged hands with our classical and our contemporary literatures, and they have been instrumental in creating our contemporary, our modern literatures. Let us talk about only India here, our modern Indian literatures. So, folk literatures and oral literatures have been so very instrumental in the design and development of our courses, in the creation of Indian writing in English. But I discovered that unfortunately, we did not have any such academic program on Indian literature, on Indian folk literature. So I proposed the course in 2006 and 7. And the first question that I faced from the board, from many boards, why folklore? Why folklore? This is a part of your marginal studies. So people, folklorists, researchers, somehow, unfortunately, we have museumized folklore. We have kept it at a distance. We have romanticized folklore, but we have never brought it to the university tables, to the syllabi of our universities. So I had the audacity as a new faculty joining the world's largest university. I had the audacity, I would say, the word, to propose a PG diploma program in folklore and culture studies in the same year. And I took 1 year to design and develop that program because the first 6 months were spent with only one question, why folklore? I had to go through several fire tests in the boards of studies, in the academic councils, in the standing committees, in front of the policy planners. I had to put the answer several times, why folklore, which I would be discussing today. Why do we need folklore in our university tables? And then in 2009, the program, the January 2009 season, the PG Diploma program in folklore studies was introduced. And initially, the admission was not really very encouraging because students had the apprehension that after doing folklore, shifting from English discipline, the mainstream, I would put it within inverted, the mainstream to the marginal studies, what is going to be my future? So many students did not really were enthusiastic to join initially. In 2009, 10, 11, I had to promote the program single-handedly Now I have this wonderful team with me, but at that time I did not know anyone. In Delhi, coming from rural Odisha, I did not know anyone. So I was my only team. Single-handedly, I promoted the program for many years. And then in due course of time, when the admissions increased, I promoted that on social media. And then fortunately, I was instrumental. I am a part of the team of UGC NET syllabus. Dr. Ravindra Sharma is also sitting here from Jharkhand Central University. He has been a part of the team. We introduced folk literature as a part of UGC NET examination. And a lot of students are qualifying that NET examination, and there is no looking back for those students, those who are qualifying the UGC NET examination for folk literature. And then this year, after the national, well, in 2018, I proposed MEG 16. You can just Google MEG, MA English, MEG 16. I proposed in 2018, once again, all by myself. And that course has more than 10,000 students, which I was just mentioning to esteemed Professor Amitava and all of you, that MEG 16 has more than 10,000 students, and the entire study material of MEG 16 is a part of our IGNOU course. And Professor Satyanath has always been my guide. He helped me with the design and development of that MEG 16 by providing me wonderful scholars who could be a part of the material preparation team. Working in IGNOU has its own strengths. In IGNOU, we do not just propose a syllabus and we do not start teaching with that syllabus. Rather, when we propose any academic program from my university, Indira Gandhi National Open University, we propose a syllabus which has to be approved by the school boards, academic councils. After that, we have course writers meetings where we take wonderful scholars like you all, like Dr. Pavitra and Dr. Charulika and all of you, all of you. So we take the best brains of the country to write the material for us. So we designed and wrote the material, and the entire printed material is on our tables, and the soft copy, which is open for all. We are People's University, so we are open for all. We are truly an open university. So our entire study material is there, MEG 16 on the eGyan course. So the students sitting here can actually go through that and use it. And also please Google the UGC NET syllabus for folk literature, so that you can see that the academic programs that I have designed on folk literature are in tandem with the UGC NET syllabus. So those who are students of these programs may be in a better position to understand, to access the UGC NET examination. So I would strongly recommend the students to go through that study material. And then this year, in fact, last year during COVID, when the National Education Policy NEP document came into existence, everyone was talking about cultures and languages. In fact, the NEP document has used the language more than 200 times. So they gave that much importance to the preservation of the dying languages and the endangered languages. They talk with the NEP document talks about family language, state language, national language, and international languages. So I had been the director of the School of Foreign Languages last 3 years, where I tried to create this collaboration between the family languages, the state languages, our national language, and also the international languages. That is why in the MA in Folklore Studies, there is one complete block that deals with diaspora folk. Like we talk about French folklore, we talk about many such international folk traditions, and we create a comparative analysis between the Indian folk traditions and the international folk traditions. I will also come to talk about that. So with that NEP document in mind, I proposed this March, 2021 March, I proposed the second year courses. The first year courses are this PG Diploma in Folklore Studies, which is already there. Students have taken admission in that program, in that course and program, whatever you want to say. And the second year courses I proposed in March this year, and in April, I had a virtual meeting with the course writers and the scholars sitting here. And in March, actually, I had a face-to-face meeting with Professor Satyanath and Professor Molly Kaushal and Professor Sadhana. 3 people were instrumental in helping me with the design and development of the syllabus. most importantly, Professor Satyanath, he was instrumental in helping me with the design of the syllabus. And then he gave me the contact address of so many scholars, with the help of whom uh, April, May, June, July, within 4 months, I designed the second year program of MA in Folklore Studies. This course MAFCS, you can go to the program guide of MAFCS in the university website, and you will see that we have tried to cover everything, theoretical aspects, and also some courses are text based, folk texts we have taken. Now the word folk text is again little bit of under scanner when it comes to the folklorists. There is a school of thought among the folklorists who believe that anything and everything that is oral is folklore. And once you document it, once you put it on the black and white, the folkloristic is lost. The folk elements are lost. And then it no more remains as a part of our folklore. We have tried to problematize that in this program. For us, folklore is flexible. For us, folklore is inclusive. It's interdisciplinary. So we have tried to take everything interdisciplinary related to folklore. Almost every day I get emails and phone calls from my students that, ma'am, if I do this MA in folklore studies, and then if I qualify the UGC NET examination on folklore studies about which you keep talking, so what are the areas that I would get into as a part of my employment? Because ultimately we look for employment. We cannot just talk about courses, glorify courses, and then there are no employment facilities for the students. We have to think from that perspective as well, which is most important. So, dear students, I see a lot of students are sitting here. For you, I would give a few points that the program MA in Folklore Studies, that it aims at creating a pool of specialized folklorists who can create a position for themselves in fields of study like teaching and research departments in colleges and universities, libraries, museums, archives, historical associations, culture councils, national centers of arts, publishing companies, funding agencies, central and state government institutions, agriculture, rural sociology, extension, medicine and nursing, women's studies departments, African American studies, popular culture, English and foreign language and literature departments as translators, teachers, interpreters, curators, musicologists, teachers, artists, performers, and many more. Film industry and TV channels also have a high demand for folklorists. You must have seen that. Folk entrepreneurs are coming up in a big way as job creators and job providers. And our program aims at creating that self-reliant, Atmanirbhar India. The scholars and the folklorists can be self-reliant and they can be entrepreneurs. So maybe this is my basic answer to the question, why folklore? During a period when students have very important degrees with them, they are qualified, and still there is a dearth of jobs. They are not getting jobs and employments. Maybe these are the things that can come between your struggle for your research, pedagogy, and also employment. This is where we try to come in. So in this lecture, in this discussion, coming 30 minutes probably, I would make an attempt to talk about the pertinent questions in academia and higher education. Why folklore? My research points will be interdisciplinary research and folklore, interdisciplinary, taking into consideration like literature, anthropology, gender studies, ethnomusicology, linguistics, psychology, and performance studies. You can even add more. And then next, I would also talk about NEP, National Education Policy, and Folklore and Culture Studies. So the collaboration between the two, I would talk about that. And then inclusion of folklore in the UGC net, which is very, very important. In several interviews last 1 year, I have joined as the subject expert in the interviews of many universities and institutions, where we have given importance to the people who have qualified the UGC NET examination in folklore studies. And next, my point would be folklore as knowledge production. And I would also try to talk about folk, classical, and modern literature, the thin line. Somehow, we confuse between the three, folk, classical, and modern. Where is the thin line of difference? And why do we need to break the boundaries while maintaining their boundaries? While maintaining their uniqueness, we somehow have to break the boundaries between folk, classical, and modern. And then I would also tell you the tale, the story of the so-called, I said so-called loser, the Deshi, Margi and Deshi dichotomy. And this is where ethnomusicology would come, marginal studies would come, and protest literature would come. Well, some anecdote I would tell you here. The winner writes history. The winner makes history. So what happens to the loser, the so-called loser? What happens to the weak, to the marginalized? Maybe they make music. So this is where ethnomusicology comes. So the folks, they tell their stories through ethnomusicology. So a couple of chapters in this course are about ethnomusicology and the kind of music that the so-called Deshi, not the Margi, and the so-called loser has made for telling his or her tale, the stories. So this is one of my points of research in this course. And I would talk about folklore, the historical perspectives, which I think I need not because all of you are already trained folklorists. But maybe for the sake of some young students sitting here, I'll briefly introduce the historical perspective of folklore. I would also try to talk about the romantic nationalism and formation of Indian regional identities through folklore. And I would mention the Indian rational from Sanskritic, Persian, and native ethnicities. And I would talk about Memo culture, memory culture, M-N-E-M-O, Memo culture, which is the collective imagination of a people. I would talk about folklore, its flexibility and inclusivity. I would talk about folklore as redemption, healing, and the functionalities of folklore. What is the function of folklore? Is it just something to enjoy? Is it art for art's sake? Or folklore is art for life's sake? Is there any usage, any utilization, any use of folklore? When I talk about the use of folklore, I am reminded that in this program, PG Diploma in Folklore and Culture Studies, which is a 30 credit course program running since 2009, which I designed long back, I told you, there is a project element, MFCP 005, and under that, the students are supposed to send me a synopsis for approval and write a 20,000 words project. And also there is a two credits for translation of folklore course where the students of different regions from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, they send me the synopsis of one folk text that they would like to translate from their languages to English. And that would be a part of their coursework, a 2 credits coursework, which is very interesting from many points of view. One, we are creating archives of translated folk texts. So that is my strategy, isn't it? I'm very, very strategical when it comes to teaching and research and pedagogy. So that translation of folklore coursework is helping me to read the very many folk texts in different regions, different parts of India, and translate it into English because I don't know too many languages. I know very few Indian languages. Maybe I know only, English, of course, is my language, and Hindi and Odia and Assamese and Bangla. This much I know. Rest of the languages I'm reading in translation through that strategic 2 credits coursework on translation of folklore. So this is where we talk about the functionality of folklore. How through the study of folklore, through the rational, through the pedagogy, we are translating. So when it is a coursework, it's a compulsion. Otherwise, the students might not have translated their tests. One of my research scholars, he did his PhD, he's from Assam, he did his PhD on the folklore and folk life of Northeast India. He came to me with some ideas. I went through that and I was very impressed. But then I put him under some conditions that if you really want to work under me for your PhD, you have to do 2 things. Go back, read a lot of critical theories, read new historicism, structuralism, post-structuralism, and most importantly, cultural materialism. So read those and come back, and also come back to me with the translated texts of these folk texts from Assam. And then he was kind of forced. I put the students under pressure to work like that. And the end product is something that you can see now. Look at my team sitting out there, isn't it? So he came with the translated English texts of the folk novels from Northeast India, and then I published those. I also published my students, so I published those texts, those novels, and today he has multiple contributions to Academia, and the entire credit is his. I do not take any of the credits. So one, he has 3 translated novels from Assamese to English. I published that with the help of Assam Sahitya Sabha and also some very renowned publishing house in Delhi. And then his contribution to folklore through his PhD thesis, which has been converted to a book. I published that book. Whoever wants, I can share that book with them. So this is how, this is a functionality of folklore studies. And then next, another point I will be talking today is feminist, queer, and disability inclines of folklore, which Dr. Nimesh Shikama, one of my team members, has written very interesting chapters on that. Feminist, queer, and disability inclines of folklore. That's a part of our program. That feminist study, feminism, queer studies, masculinity studies, and disability studies. Everything is included as a part of our pedagogy in the academic programs that I offer on folklore. And finally, I would talk about On the Road to an Indian Folk Poetics, about which Professor Satyanath was very emphasized. He emphasized a lot. He said, Nandini, you must introduce this. On the Road to Indian Folk Poetics. What next? You have designed diploma programs, MA programs, massive programs are there. Students have taken admission. You have introduced UGC NET in Indian folklore studies, and people are getting their placements in that. But next what? On the road to Indian folk poetics, I would talk about that. And I also discuss about the storytelling and folk tales as pedagogical methods. So folk tales are not just stories told by our grandmother on our bed. Rather, they are the stories which are instrumental in the making of our modern literatures. So I'll talk about that folk tales as pedagogical methods and use of folklore in teaching of English literature. English literature, which is considered as a part of our elite studies. I put it within inverted, though I don't consider it that way. So use of folk literature in the teaching of English literature. MEG 16, Indian folk literature, is the best example of that. And use of technology in archiving and documentation. One of the chapters, not one, more than one, 3 to 4 chapters of this massive program talk about the use of technology in archiving and documentation. Now, this is a part of technology. Today, sitting in my home, my residence library, I am talking to the students all over the world on folklore by the use of technology. So for the archiving and documentation of the dying languages and the dying cultures, how we use technology. And for that, I have taken the help of engineers and doctors to write my chapters. That's why I said that we are truly interdisciplinary when it comes to folklore studies. In that PG diploma in folklore studies, even I have medical doctors who are my students. A doctor from Safdarjung Hospital, he did this program a couple of years back, and he wrote a project on Ayurveda and Unani, the medicines, the folk medicines, which are also an influential factor in the making of your allopathy and the modern medicines. And that thesis came to me as something very, very fresh and new. I know nothing about medicine. I am a teacher of literature. I'm a poet. I know nothing about medicine. And then when I went through his project report, I got so much interested that today I take interest even in medicine. Whenever I get some medicine for any of my ailments, I go through the composition of those medicines and then I try to compare those. And even I talk to my doctor students about that. So some of the chapters in this program also talk about the use of technology in archiving, documentation, and the making of folklore studies. And then another aspect that I would talk, rather I would request Professor Satyanath to talk, folk as an alternative epistemology. He emphasized that this should be a part of that. And then ultimately I would talk about folk as an alternative modernity. I have 2 books on that subject, folklore and the alternative modernities, where folk, the research and the pedagogy thereof can be used as a part of our alternative modality in our performance studies, in our literature, and everything. And the course MA FCS, MA in Folklore and Culture Studies, I will come to the syllabus of that later on. For the students sitting here who may not have too much of exposure to folklore studies, I would just take 1 minute to talk about the historical perspective of folklore. Uh, Folklore emerged as a new field of learning in the 19th century when the antiquaries in England and the philologists in Germany began to look closely at the ways of the lower classes, so-called lower classes of the society. In 1812, the German brothers Jacob and William Grimm, they commenced publishing influential volumes of oral folk narratives and interpretations of Germanic methodology. The word they used to denote this subject was Volkskunde. Then on 22nd August 1846, so which means little less than 200 years, the English antiquary William John Toms, he sent a letter to a magazine catering to the intellectually curious term folk-lore. Folklore was created in 1846 actually, and he wanted that the awkward phrase like popular antiquaries can be stopped. Anyway, to the layman, to the common people, even today, folklore suggests falsity, fantasy, and distortion of facts. And many conjure up pictures of a grandmother spinning traditional stories in mountain cabins or casually costumed peasants performing seasonal dances and music. They consider this as folklore. This is what I have tried to problematize in the research and teaching on folklore studies. And in the course, in the programs that we have offered collaboratively, we have presented folklore as a discipline of learning and knowledge system. And we have to understand, deeply understand, and study the links of folklore to other allied disciplines before you get into new historicist and cultural materialist study of folklore and the activities and habits of the indigenous group. You ask me what is folklore? My very simplistic answer would be a way of life. So, in the academic programs that we are talking today, we discuss the verbal expressions, the stories, epics, legends, poetry, riddles, and many other narratives like words, signs, and names and symbols. We talk about musical expressions in the programs, in the courses, including songs and instrumental music. Instrumental music is also one of my chapters in this course. The folk origins of those instrumental musics, those instruments for making music, and how they have come up to influence the modern musical instruments that the film industry and many of us use. We also talk about the musical expressions, songs, and movements, including the dance, folk dance. Like when we talk about Odissi or Bharatanatyam kind of classical dance forms, we also look at the folk origins of those dance forms. Like Gotipua and Mahari and Devadasi traditions, how they have been instrumental in the making of the classical Odissi dance. We also talk about that. And we talk about the plays, theatre, folk theatre. So one block completely talks about the folk theatre. Uh, uh, and then artistic forms, rituals, performances, and we talk about the tangible expressions like productions of art, artifacts, drawings, designs, paintings, body painting, tattoo, pottery, terracotta, mosaic, woodwork, metalware, medicines, jewelry, baskets making, needlework, textiles, fabric, glassware, carpet making, puppets, costumes, handicrafts, musical instruments, and architectural forms. So these are the tangible expressions that have been a part of the study of those have been a part of our academic programs today. And then we talk about the intangible expressions, the copyrights of the folklorists, which is very, very important. Dear students, if you really want to be a folklorist, this is the first thing that you should keep in mind, copyrights. Copyright issues are so important. The other day, I was traveling from Kolkata to Shantiniketan, and a group of bowl singers, they came into the train I was sitting in the train, and then they started playing the bowl music, Maner Manush. Such beautiful songs, Lalan Fakir and his music. They started making music. Then I requested them that can I record your music, and then can I use those as a part of my course material, and they agreed to it. I sufficiently paid them, and I recorded their music on my mobile, and I have been using those as a part of my audio video material for the folklore studies by giving due credit to those to those performers by name. I also use their name, that this is Mr. So and so, this is Miss So and so, who is playing this instrument and then singing the bowl music, and then the meaning of it, how the bowl music has influenced Rabindranath Tagore, that Maner Manush concept. I talk about that in my courses. You can see those YouTubes. If you want, I can share those with you. This is very interesting and beautiful. But then please give the copyright. This is a part of your intangible expression, that any other output of creative and cumulative intellectual activity, property, characteristic of a traditional community's cultural identity and inheritance, please give copyright to them. That is a part of our intangible expressions, and we use that as our chapters. And most importantly, being a teacher of literature and a poet myself, I talk about the oral and the written literatures. What are the oral literatures? In course 8, MFC 008, please go to that study material. You will see that we have taken texts like Pathir Panchali. We have taken so many folk literary texts like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the epic traditions and the folk traditions. I have one poetry collection titled Sita, where I have written 25 cantos on the character Sita from the Ramayana. I have deconstructed the character, and I have placed her vis-a-vis the Sita-ness of each one of you. The progressive, independent, contemporary, very modern Sita, who doesn't brood, complain, or cry about her destiny. Rather, she takes her destiny in her stride and she contributes. She is an educationist, a teacher in the ashram. She is a great cook. She cooks for everybody. She is a healer, like Reiki therapy. She heals by touching. And she is a single mother. So I talk about that progressive, contemporary, very modern woman, Sita, in my text, Sita. And this is where I have taken so many oral literatures. I read 400 Ramayans before I wrote that book, Sita. And we have one text on Mahabharata also in that course. I would share the program guide and the course material with whoever wants. So maybe that would give you detailed information. Now I think I have only 10 more minutes left. In the course, we also talk about inclusivity. Folklore is inclusive. What is more important than that? So a little bit we talk about the inclusivity of Islam and Sikhism. The folklore, it has always been inclusive to the extent that the great Muslim mystic Baba Farid or Ganj Sarkar is regarded as the first Punjabi poet, and Guru Nanak is chronicled as the second one. Guru Granth Sahib, the holy scripture of the Sikhs, is currently the documented work of Baba Farid's verses. The divine life teachings of the Sufi poets are filled with traditional vernacular lore. Bhai Mardana, a Muslim and lifelong companion of Guru Nanak, belongs to a so-called lower caste from Islam. He is also a part of the sacred Punjabi religious texts. Likewise, the poetry and folklore of two other Muslim Rubabis, Satta and Balwant, are included in the holy books of Guru Granth Sahib. With an inclusive vision for the world, the folklores, they advocate egalitarian societies to enrich them with peace, stability, and cooperation among all cosmic creations. We talk about that. The inclusivity in Islam and Guru Granth Sahib and Sikhism. Now, we have also in one of the chapters, one of my course writers, she has talked about the inclusive living tradition of Jagannath culture from Odisha. Jagannath culture, the cult, it practices inclusion and compassion for all beings, irrespective of their religion, status, or tribe. It addresses the sustainability challenges today. It talks about Sanatan Dharma, Sanatan Dharma means eternal duties, laws, and practices. It talks about universal brotherhood, combining elements of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Tantrism, and Shaktism, and tribal and native traditions and communities. There is a Navakalevar for the three gods, Lord Jagannath, Balabhadra, and Subhadra. Every 12 years, they take a new incarnation. It's symbolic of the human life. No one is permanent. Tomorrow, we all have to die. And the three colors, yellow, white, and black, of Lord Jagannath, Balabhadra, and Subhadra, represent the three colors of the human race: the dark skinned, the white skinned, and the yellow skinned. The dark skin of Lord Jagannath is inclusive of the dark skinned people. We cannot be dismissive about the skin colors of people. So, Lord Jagannath's dark skin symbolizes that. And Lord Jagannath has incomplete limbs. He doesn't have complete hands and legs. So, that is inclusive about the differently abled. People who are differently abled can be as powerful, as complete as Lord Jagannath himself. So, inclusivity with dark skin color, with incomplete limbs, the disabled, the differently abled. This is the culture of Jagannath. And also in the kitchen of Lord Jagannath, the Shabaras and the Daitapati, the tribals, people from the tribal communities, they are the cooks. They cook the massive food, Mahaprasad, in the Jagannath temple. And the oil-free cooking. We are talking about the contemporary world, oil-free cooking and healthy food and all that. Oil-free cooking as per the tribal modes of cooking, ingredients boiled in earthen pots, is a part of the Jagannath culture. And the ritualistic tribal wall paintings and the drawings are also a part of the Jagannath culture. Tribal dance, songs, movements, tribal instruments like the sarangi. So these things are a part of that. And when we talk about social inclusivity, Jagannath culture comes to my mind, coming from Odisha and also being a researcher of this kind of a folk tradition. And if you have gone through the Lakshmi Puran text of the 15th century poet Balaram Das, it's a medieval Odia literature text. It talks about the counter narrative to patriarchy, to Brahmanical authority, and it advocates both feminism and caste equality. It challenges the hypocrisy and the stubbornness of patriarchy through the female goddess of wealth, goddess Lakshmi, who, contrary to her counterparts from the opposite sex, she decides to reward her devotee, a woman of the so-called lower caste. She goes to her house because of her devotion and she rewards that woman. And as a result of that, her husband, Lord Jagannath, and her brother-in-law, Lord Balabhadra, they ask her to leave the temple. That she went to a low caste woman's house, so she is asked to leave the temple. She goes out of the temple, but once Lakshmi has left the temple, there is no food, there is no life. And this is when Lord Jagannath and Balabhadra ask her to come back to the temple, and she comes back with some precondition. That So look at this text of 15th century. It's a truly feministic text. So she comes back to the temple with something in her mind that I would be accessible to the so-called lower caste, and I would go to whosever house I please, and as a Chandaloni, as a so-called lower caste woman, I will cook for you. She got disguised as a Chandaloni, and she cooked for Lord Jagannath and Lord Balabhadra. So this is when, Professor Satya P. Mohanty, in his article, Alternative Modernities and Medieval Indian Literature, the Odia Lakshmi Puran as radical pedagogy, he writes something very interesting, comparing that with European academia. He says we need to reread medieval Indian vernacular literature through new lenses. Looking in particular at the way traditional religious idioms are being deployed for novel explorations. New questions are being asked during this transitional period from new perspectives, and new social values are being explored. Medieval Indian literature, I read that as oral literature, reveals a picture of a dynamic society in flux. a very different image from the one we have inherited from James Mill. And the view of modernity that emerges in them is at odds with the capitalist modernity that dominates the European context. So the inclusive IGNOU MA in Folklore and Culture Studies program also talks about these things, like we talk about understanding gender and feminist approaches to folklore, queer folklore, the theoretical perspectives, intersections in disability and folklore studies. We talk about gender approaches in folklore through the feminist lens, gender constructs, and the representation in the folk tales, the case of Little Red Riding Hood kind of things we have taken. Contemporary fairy tales in popular culture and Cinderella tales we have taken. Gender and folklore in the Indian context, vis-a-vis the portrayal of women in folklore, myth and legends, queer theory and folklore, queer reading of the fairy tales, same-sex relationships and gender fluidity with examples from ancient Indian legends are a part of the course, transgender queer, the beliefs, rituals and perspectives, theoretical approaches to the study of disability folklore, motifs and tropes of the disability in the fairy tales of India, and disability in the Indian context like Astabakra stories and Bhimabhoi stories, and folk beliefs and practices. In a global preview also, we talk about that, and we also discuss the methodological inclusivity in folklore studies. Now, coming to humor, humility, and storytelling in folk poetry. For that, I would request you to go to the text by Paula Richman, Ramayan Stories in Modern South India. It's an anthology, Lakshmana's Laugh, a poem, a women's old song. It's translated by V.N. Rao from Telugu. That is a part of our course 8. We have taken some very interesting folk poems which are humorous and also pedagogical at the same time. In one of the poems, what happens is Lord Ram, Sita, and Lakshman, they come back to Ayodhya from Lanka, and so what happens is when they come back and the coronation ceremony is going on, suddenly Lakshman burst into a laughter. Lakshman has padte, and then everyone has their anxieties. In the court, everyone is thinking, why did he laugh? Lord Ram is thinking that maybe because my wife lived in somebody's, so this is a folk poem, right? Not the classical person. So my wife lived in somebody's house for 10 months and I took her back. Is he laughing because of that? Sugriv is thinking something that deceptively Bali was killed and I am the king. Maybe he's laughing because of that. So everyone has their. Bharat is thinking that maybe Lakshman laughed because I became the king because of my mother for last 14 years. So everyone has anxieties. So see how folklore talks about very common things, very rooted things. So when somebody laughs, you will have your anxieties in your mind. Why did he laugh? And then Lord Ram says that he should be beheaded. Uska sar kaat do. He should be beheaded because he laughed at somebody. Then this is where Lord Shiva and Parvati intervene and they say that Lakshman should be given a chance to give the reason behind his laughter. So this kind of humorous poems are there. And Lakshman says, okay, so 14 years back when I went to the forest, I requested Nidra Devi, the goddess of sleep, to allow me to remain awake for 14 years so that my wife Urmila can sleep for 14 years and she will not miss me. Now that I came back and I want to start my conjugal life with my beautiful wife, Nidra Devi is standing in front of me in the court and she wants me to sleep for another 14 years. So this is why I am laughing at my own destiny. I'm not laughing at anybody, I'm laughing at my destiny. So then Nidra Devi is requested that he should not be given 14 years of sleep now. He should be given an opportunity to normal conjugal life and normal sleep pattern. And then Lakshman is spared. So this is the humorous poem with lot of, you can say morals. And then Lord Ram regrets. He asks his guru, Vasisht, that, okay, I doubted the integrity of my brother. I thought that he is laughing at me. Now give me some punishment. So see, even Lord Ram is treated as a human being with human frailties, human weaknesses that a human being can have. So this is how the folk tales, they present stories in a very, very humanized manner. They don't glorify characters. They present even Lord Ram or anyone for that matter in a very humanized manner. So then Guru Vasisht says, okay, your punishment can be Lakshman pressed your feet for 14 years and you slept. Now today you have to press his feet. Uska paँव दबाना पड़ेगा and then he will sleep. So then the elder brother, Lord Ram himself, makes the bed for his younger brother Lakshman, puts him to sleep by pressing his feet, and that story ends there. So, the stories, they are so layered. So many layers of meanings are there. In the folk tales, that kind of inclusivity is there. That kind of commonness is there. You can actually relate to them. So we also talk about the regional and the national identities between the pidgins and the creoles, the different languages, the polygenetic theories, and the creation of the pidgins and the creoles. When I talk about that in my course, I am reminded about my experience in Mauritius a few years back when I designed their diploma in folklore studies for the MGU Mauritius. They had a multicultural country. They have Bhojpuri and French as two major languages, and also so many other languages there. So the creation of those pidgins and the creoles, those mixed languages. So this is where the importance of folklore comes in. In the world, there were 6 lakh languages initially. Now there are only 6,000 languages. Now what happened to the rest other languages? They died a natural death because of the lack of documentation. So one of the chapters in course 3 in the first year, which is a part of your PGDFCS, and in the second year in course 8, we talk about language death, dying languages of the world, and how and why should we preserve those languages, and how communication technology can be instrumental towards the preservation of the dying languages is also a part of our pedagogy. You ask me why folklore? My simple answer, like I have been only answering that question forever, another very simple answer is preservation, documentation, archiving. If we don't preserve, don't document, and don't archive, what are we going to give our progeny? What kind of culture are we giving? Are we passing on to our next generation? Probably through these kind of academic programs. By taking folklore to the university tables, we are serving our squirrel responsibilities, our small little squirrel responsibilities towards the preservation of folklore. We talk about comparative literature, Indian thinking from Sanskrit, Persian, and folk traditions. We talk about the Betal Pachisi. We talk about Birbal tales, Tenali Rama, Shahryar, Aladdin's wonderful lamps, the 3 apple stories, the tale of the hunchback, Ali Baba and Charlie's Chor, the 40 thieves, the fishermen and the jinns, the lovers. So many of the Sanskritic and Persian texts along with the Iranian folklore. So many folk tales. So Bharat Barsha and Faris, India and Iran, their cultures collaborated as an amalgamation we take, and we're talking about them in the course. And we talk about the Memo culture. Sorry, Memo culture as folklore as memory, folklore as history of a group of individuals, and how we are taking their memory and using those customs, rituals, and performances as a part of our courses. We talk about that. I would like to clear here that memory and history were considered somewhat similar and identical. But now it is only very recently that the theoretical debates relating to the study of history and memory have gained currency as two distinct disciplines. And also an interdisciplinary approach to the two distinct disciplines have been taken. And an important point to consider when we talk about folklore as pedagogy is that what is more important than the tradition itself is how it was constituted in the past and how it has been and being transmitted from one generation to another as a part of our memory. What is worthy of preservation was important at one point of time, but this selective approach to the events has actually been counterproductive for folklore, and we have stopped that selective approach. Anything and everything that is important and instrumental in the creation of the contemporary literature and society has been considered to be important. And we have given importance to memo culture vis-a-vis folklore. And here I'm tempted to refer to Plato's difficult to digest argument in support of the oral over the written. This is a bit extreme, but still I would quote it here. Plato maintains that since there is an absence of the speaker in the written mode of transference of a narrative, so written is less credible, oral is more credible. Even Plato goes to that extent. I keep that in mind, but at the same time, for us, the flexible contemporary folklorists, both the oral and the written mediums should be equally important. The question is not who is the winner, who is the loser between the two modes. Oral is better or written is better. That is not the question. It is rather in the recognition of the fact that one cannot sustain in the absence of the other. Both oral and written are important. So this is what is important today in the academic programs. And that is the answer to the question, why folklore? What are the ways in which memo culture registers itself in folk? How these ways are linked with human languages? Is language the only medium to register memory? Interestingly, the identity formation through folk is a two-way process. There are many blind spots in the history of folk and politics and all sorts of language, meaning, epistemology, power, debates, and memo culture brings everything to the table for a discussion. We have a holistic approach to folklore. Folklore is healer. Folklore is redemptive. We learn a lot about our background, our tradition, and we pass it on to our posterity through these academic programs by bringing folklore to the table for discussion. By making folklore a part of our research and pedagogy, we have actually given an answer to the question, why folklore? So with this thing in my mind, I leave it open with a food for thought to all of you to ask yourselves, why folklore? I contributed in my own way, in my small little way, in my squirrel way, to folklore studies by introducing it as a part of MA English program, diploma programs, and a complete MA in folklore program, and also the UGC net syllabus as folk literature. I contributed in my own way, and I am always a student of folklore. I never consider myself an expert of folklore. I'm a student of folklore, and I would always remain so. And I would always like to exchange my thoughts and ideas with each one of you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nandini, for such a wonderful introduction to such a diverse area. You already told us about the policy changes which are happening, which you yourself are leading, the courses which you have prepared, and also you have touched upon very important issues of folklore studies in contemporary India and also world. I think you have touched upon those issues. I already can see there are two very important questions, pedagogical questions from Keshav Bansal. Do you want me to read those, or can you see that?
Yeah, Keshav is a student of this folklore program. He always sends me questions.
Okay. Okay. So would
And
you like to respond?
he is very, very active. Yeah, I can respond. So please read out because I cannot see those questions.
Sure. I'll do that. So Keshav Bansal writes, the subjects of folklore studies are often taken up by other disciplines, literature, social anthropology, etc. However, the treatment of such subjects are more often than not defined by a delimitation of discipline-centric hermeneutics and methodologies. Now, how does the discipline of folklore negotiate between, incorporate, and expand upon variable and divergent disciplinary practices and the hermeneutics? So this is the first question.
Yeah, so Keshav, my entire lecture was an answer to that. That folklore is not an independent discipline, rather it is very, very interdisciplinary. It is so very closely connected, associated with literature. I myself being the best example, I am a literature teacher. And folklore is associated with the medicine, science, technology, and anthropology, history, everything that I talked about. So I think my entire lecture was only an answer to Keshav's this question. And any further questions, Keshav, we will have a chat.
Okay. So that okay. So I think you have already answered this second part as well.
Yes.
So now I'll move to. I don't think there is any other question in the chat box. Okay, yeah, there is a question from Mary Vidya Paul Selvi.
Okay.
So after thanking you, she has questioned. Her question is: can you throw some light on the ecological relevance of folklore?
Oh, yes, yes. It's a very, very important question. Some of the chapters, they talk about eco-criticism and ecofeminism and folklore. Folklore is very closely associated with ecology, the preservation of ecology. Like when I talked about Lord Jagannath and the sustainability culture, uh, oil-free food, boiled food, using indigenous spices, masala, and folk cuisine, and use of folk medicines. So very close to nature, little bit away from the artificial, the superficial lifestyles. And also, last 2 years, COVID has taught us one thing, that we have to go back to nature. We have to go back to our roots, and folklore deeply advocates that deep ecology, ecofeminism, and ecological studies, and we have so many chapters in this program where we talk about the tribes and the forest and their important contribution to our lives.
Right. I think this answers the question. So if there is no other question in the chat box. So if any of the participants wants to join us and want to share their comments or put a question directly to Professor Nandini Sahu, you are welcome. Okay, good. There are two more questions. One is, can folk song be considered as a material to study the culture?
Yes.
This is a question from Irangle Hemang.
Oh, yes, yes, folk songs, the folk songs of so many regions of India, which we have actually taken as a part of the study material. Go to MFC 008, you will see there is one complete block, folk songs, starting from Videshia to Sambalpuri music, so many varieties of folk songs. Some of them we have translated, some are already translated, and we have discussed those as a part of our folk poetry section. Block 3, course 8, MFC 008, folk songs are a part of our course.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I can see that you remember each of the units because you have developed it. Thank you. So there is another question from just a minute, Rohit Yadav. He is asking how to look upon the performing aspect of folklore in departments of language and literature, where emphasis is on the text rather than performance.
Well, it's again an important question, but I think I already answered to that we have taken Jatra, Kathakali, Videshya, Pala, and Dandanata, and so many varieties of folk traditions which were instrumental in the making of our classical theatre. Nagamantal and Hayavardhan are a part of our course 8, block 7. And we have talked about folk theatre in those, and how folk theatres, even Varnam Vana, Shakespeare's play, and Varnam Vana. So European literature, American literature, and Indian adaptations, Indian folk adaptations are there in the course. Please go through that material and send me emails. I always respond to my mails. Nandini Sahu at IGNOU.ac.in. Once you have gone through those chapters, maybe you can send me your very specific questions rather than these general kind of questions. And Professor Amitava, if nobody has any other question, then maybe I would request Professor Satyanath.
No, Professor Satyanath has already raised. There are a few other questions, but Professor Satyanath has already raised his hand. So
Okay.
yes, Satyanath.
I want him to comment.
Yeah. He has already raised his hand. Yes,
Hello,
Satyanath. Please.
Please switch on your video. I want to see you.
Yes, I think probably you are the best person in the world to sell folklore as an academic discipline. Okay. I think, the way that you expanded the scope of folklore and bringing it to an interaction with various disciplines in various levels is something that has happened and happening for the last 20 years. Folklore is stuck with structuralism and formalism for a long time. I mean, for that matter, most of the disciplines were formalistic for a very long time. Postmodernism and probably post-colonialism has brought in life into these most disciplines and in particular social things. But I also see both postmodernism and postmodernism with their emphasis on the margin, identity, self, and a sort of an activity says that we from in order to escape from formalism, which folklore universalistic was, I have a feeling in terms of following the trajectories of post-colonialism and postmodernism, we are trying to move to other extreme. For example, it is not a criticism, it's an introspection I'm trying to do. Women studies, Dalit studies, diaspora studies, and a variety of other studies have gone to the other extreme. Too much of nationalistic, too much of individual and identity crisis. So what has happened in the course is, look 100 years back, the same India talked about Vishwa Sahitya. But at the time when nationalism was at its peak. Now 100 years after that, we are somehow trying to leave the trajectory of Vishwa Sahitya and trying to move in the other direction. After all, many of these discussions have become, including diaspora studies. There is a national nation underscoring the diaspora identity. So between these tensions, I think folklore, it's very important for folklore to somehow negotiate the danger of going to the other extreme end. I think being always highly local and being always completely environment-centered, folklore by definition itself had this advantage of going to the other extreme. I think the need for the hour for folklore is to negotiate how best can we do these studies, folklore studies. I think that's the point. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Satyanath. Wish we could hear more clearly and a bit more from you. But yeah, it seems there are technical issues. I would just like to add to what to that question and how Nandini you have responded to Rohit Yadav's question, that even in literature, traditional literature departments, we don't do literature anymore in that traditional methodological way. We include particularly those who take a comparative framework, particularly from comparative cultural studies. They do researches, and also while teaching, they bring in multimedia representations. And it has become, performance studies has become a very important part of our understanding of literary texts as well. So I think the departments have expanded, particularly literature departments I know, have expanded the methodological limitations or the methodological models they had earlier. So they often now more and more text is even seen as a performance. In Delhi Comparatives, we primarily deal with text from that perspective, which comes from our training in the comparative literature while doing comparative Indian literature in our department in the university. Now, Nandini, there is a second question, another question from Shivam Varma. After thanking you, his question is, can you please, this is about the name of the Lakshmana story. I think Shivam, as Nandini has already said, you can send a mail and I'm sure she will be responding.
And
I'll go to the next question. Jinan Masroor. After thanking you, the question is, how can we connect folklore with the post-human deliberations on animal ethics? Post-human deliberations on animal ethics. I think it goes back to that whole ecological argument that you are having, Nandini, earlier.
Yes, yes. We already discussed about that. The fables and parables and folklore.
Right, right. Then Srimoyi Chattopadhyay, after thanking you, she has asked, I am wondering how folklore defines cultural identity.
Folklore basically defines cultural identity of a society.
Yeah.
And this is what we have been discussing, that any indigenous culture, and we say any tribal culture, any folk culture, the folklore studies discusses that, and then this is up to us how much we utilize that as a part of our contemporary research and teaching. We talked about that. Yeah.
There was, I think, Nimeshika Venkatesan had raised her hand. Are you there, Nimeshika Venkatesan?
So
Yes.
before Nimeshika asks me any question, I would request Nimeshika, Charulika, and Dr. Ravindra Sharma, and whoever, and Diksha, whoever they have contributed to the course, if they have any comments, they can say. Already Professor Satyanath pointed out a few things. Rest others from my team may also like to add to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Professor Sahu, I want to take this opportunity particularly to commend the kind of work that you've done putting together this very inclusive and integrated perspective to understanding folklore studies, which I think is pioneering work. I remember when I began, and Professor Satyanath is very much a part of the beginnings of my journey into folklore, where I actually began starting wondering if I could do this course in IGNOU, almost 9 years ago, but things didn't work out at that time. And life has come a full circle where you have given me the opportunity to contribute, to this section. So I would congratulate you for doing this fantastic work. That is the first thing. Second, as scholars of folklore and as the people are beginning on this journey of trying to study folklore in terms of cultural studies, which provides more opportunities for intermediate and interdisciplinary studies. I was wondering what steps can we take for the future in taking this forward and making this a more monetizing venture, if I may say that, and something, and in what way can we create scope for this to be a serious academic discipline? Because when Alan Dundas said that, in the 19th century, folk was a term that was not something that was appreciated, and we've come a long way from that to actually studying this. So that was just something that I was thinking about, like the future path that that lays ahead for us in this venture. Thank you so much, Professor Sahu.
Yeah, Dr. Charulika and Dr. Pavitra. Dr. Nimeshika, thank you so much for raising this question. This is where I left my lecture actually towards the future poetics of folklore. I left it as a food for thought for each one of us, since we all are folklorists. The future, if you ask me individually, independently, if you ask me, then I would say that now that we have introduced folklore as a part of our MA programs, and a lot of students are coming up with their synopsis to do their PhD on folklore studies. The policy planners can somehow be communicated, be conveyed how to change our research and pedagogy. Some traditional and conventional universities, how to introduce folklore and folklore research into them. Now, maybe this is my aim that on a coming 5 years, I want to see folklore as a part of the MA programs in at least 50 Indian universities. I go to many universities in their board as a member of their board of studies, and almost everywhere I introduce folklore studies. Maybe this massive task can be taken up by each one of us. Professor Satyanath is already doing his bit, and I am following him, and I am also trying to do my bit. And I request the youngsters like Pavitra and Nimeshika and all of you, Diksha, Charulika, Dr. Ravindra. Dr. Ravindra Sharma is a resource. He is a part of this UGC net syllabus. So I can see these young scholars there, and I would request you all to be the future of poetics rather than asking me that question. You be the future, take it to different universities. You have the potential to do that.
Absolutely, ma'am. With your guidance, I'm sure it's going to be great. We are going to have a bright future for folklore studies. Thank you so much for everything.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think Satyanath, you want to share something?
Just a small comment.
Yeah.
The future of the folklore has to be in the hands of the younger generation rather than looking towards us. Maybe Nandini is definitely, and I'm not. That's one thing. Secondly, I think when we started this, when we means Nandini, me, Sadhana Naitani, and Malika, when we started talking about this course, we already had thought of a sort of pattern.
Yes.
In folklore studies, either as a folklore studies group or as an annual meeting ground, or all these things take time. We have that in mind, and that's one of the reasons why we think we have to be
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Dr. Nimeshika, uh, uh, so the success of this kind of a program and this kind of an academic research will be there the day nobody asks us the question, why folklore? No English department,
Yes,
no
ma'am.
no comparative literature department, no English department basically would ask the question, why folklore? So that is the future of folk poetics. Nobody should ask why. Do we ask why American literature? Do we ask why British literature? Why Shakespeare? Why Shelley, Keats, Byron? Did we ever ask?
Exactly.
Yes,
We never.
absolutely.
We never ask why Keats, why Shakespeare, why. Then we need not ask why folklore. So that would be the future of folk poetics.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
ma'am.
So I think Rajesh Kumar has a question. Yes, please go ahead. Rajesh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
Go
first
ahead,
of all,
Mike.
yeah, first of all, let me congratulate Professor Nandini for having spoken so beautifully about folklore studies, and it was a very, I would say, very informative lecture. Okay, it's not a question. I think it's just an observation. Okay,
Okay.
to just what Professor Nandini has talked about. I think, I mean, there is one more, I mean, perspective which we need to look at, which is, the postmodern angle. Okay, like a modern paradigm, you can say, makes man, society, culture. Okay, the creator of the culture, you can say. In the postmodern perspective, what we look at is obviously the reversal of this whole angle, paradigm, where we see like man, society, individual, we can say, mere as signifiers, element of discourses, you can say. So what is we notice, I mean, that in postmodernity is obviously the triumph of culture over the life as central idea, and which, I mean, which we need to, I mean, look at the folk culture studies also from this point of view as well, like how postmodernity is the like age of cultural hegemony, you can. Okay, and obviously, I mean, when we look at like postmodernity, we have like cultural theorists also. In cultural theories, I'm reminded of like Baudrillard, Bourdieu, you can say. And obviously, we look at all like cultural imperialism, how it produces like global consumer culture, okay, which is latent with a lot of, you can say, terminology such as like Americanization or Coca colonization, McDonaldization, So now there's a new perspective. What I need to, say is that, which we need to add to these, folklore cultural studies, you can say, where we look at consumer culture. You look at, for instance, the Pepsi advertisement, where we people talk like, yeah, dil mange more. So here, what is happening? Consumption is determining our identity. So this is another perspective which from which we need to look at the folklore studies. So it's just observation to what
Yeah,
Professor Nandi has told.
yeah.
So
Thank you, thank you.
it was a wonderful talk, Professor Nandi. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Dr. Rajesh. Dr. Rajesh is my new colleague in IGNOU. He just joined last week. While we congratulate him, I also
Thank you.
welcome you to my area of research. I would invite you to do one or two recordings with me on this aspect that you pointed out. Thank you so very
Definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
much. Right.
Yes, I think a lot of questions that have come, and also I must say that because there are no more questions, it seems. You see, the course that you have developed, if I look at from the perspective of policy making in literature departments, for quite some time, maybe for last 10 to 15 years, literature departments are in India have shifted more and more, particularly in the research, into the arena of cultural studies, where that old division between high literature, low literature, or literature and other genres are getting sort of blurred. And it is given a new opportunity in literature departments. Whereas a few folklore department syllabi that I have seen often would be seen as examples of that old-time understanding of folklore, limiting yourself to sort of only medieval, oral, or only oral, contemporary, only tied to villages, etc., etc. The syllabus that you have made, which you have outlined, shows how a syllabus can be made keeping in mind the comparative cultural shift that has happened all over the world, and yet talking of folklore, and by that redefining folklore the way it is traditionally it was being understood. Okay, when I say traditionally, I don't mean that contemporary scholars have not written or changed the version and the idea of folklore in last 20 years or 30 years. But in Indian pedagogy, perhaps yours should be the most inclusive, experimental syllabus, which will change not only folklore studies, but I'm sure that if anyone goes through that syllabus, will be able to find cues for redrafting their changing their understanding of how to do literature or how to do film studies, how to do comparative cultural studies, keeping in at center those disciplinary material wise beat of bindings that they come up with. Thanks a lot. Shweta Saraf, do you want to add anything? No, perhaps.
Maybe Pavitra wants to add something.
Yeah, now I am inviting Pavitra to.
Pavitra has been mostly contributing to the course. Pavitra.
Thank you so much, ma'am. First of all, I would like to thank you for such an insightful lecture. And I would like to say, like, while looking at the course syllabus and the course material, I also realized how radical it is in its approach. And I think it's radical, but it's also at the same time honest and authentic to what actually folklore is. Because the dominant understanding might be that folklore, is in the rural areas, or it belongs to the past, but folklore is essentially dynamic, and it evolves and it changes with times. And I think the course reflects that if folklore is evolving and changing with time, then the ways in which we approach it also need to change. And I think the course does that, and it connects the way we as individuals, modern individuals, if I might say, connect with folklore today. I think the course also takes that into consideration, that we as individuals, the way my relationship with folklore around me has changed, the academic discipline also needs to take that into account. And I think the course does that really well. So thank you so much for introducing us to all these different varied aspects of folklore and how it can be done. And I think we all gained and learned a lot from it.
Yeah. Thank you, Pavitra. Coming 2 decades, I will be teaching in this in Indian universities. So I'm sure that we have a long way to go together. Wherever I introduce folklore programs, you all will be a part of my team forever. Thanks to Professor Satyanath.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That means a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I think, Pavitra, we can close the session.
Okay. So once again, Nandini ma'am, thank you so much. I would like to thank you. And I would also like to thank all of you who on a weekend took out time and joined us for this discussion. It would not have been possible without your participation. And that's it. Then maybe we can now close the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaskar,
Thank you,
Dr. Ramita.
Nandini. Thank you.
Yeah, namaskar, sir. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.